Welcome back to another episode here on the Enneagram at Work podcast. I am your host, Sarah Wallace. And if you're listening to this on the weekend when it's published, welcome. And I hope you're having a great Saturday. Regardless of when you're listening to this, I hope you're having a great weekend, week, day. And speaking of welcome back, I am getting back from another workshop trip, this time down in Dallas. And it was very windy when I was down there. There was a tornado watch the morning of the workshop. The electricity at the hotel went out, which was kind of eerie for a few hours. I was wondering how that was going to go, getting ready. And then that night, my flight ended up getting canceled multiple times. They tried rebooking it, got canceled again, which is fine. It made it back safe and sound. I always, anytime there are flight delays or issues, knock on wood, it's been on the way home, which most of the time there's a little bit more flexibility rather than coming in. So thankful for that. Thankful to get back safe and sound. And that group was like all groups in their own unique way, was a really fun one because we got to share the Enneagram with a group of emerging and new leaders. So rather than being a group that works side by side, where we're really talking about coworker dynamics and relationship building, working through real life scenarios, there was a little bit of that, but really the focus in those situations when it's used kind of for that professional leadership development programming is about self-awareness and self-management. And so we introduced the Enneagram through the lens of leadership styles, being self-aware of our strengths and when we overuse those strengths as leaders, and then looking at how we can use the Enneagram with different types. And then we'll look at some specific growth goals, depending on what type you are, to work towards, or I guess along that leadership path. So that was a wonderful experience. That's always really fun. And it was interesting too, because we got to overlay the new emerging leadership map with the leadership teams map. And I'm going to be sharing an episode maybe in a couple weeks, just things to think about and that dynamic and how your own leadership team can use that, and just kind of the common themes among the emerging leaders group versus the leadership team, how to kind of help the emerging leadership team grow, where the gaps might be for the leadership team. So just some things to look at. And again, all of this with the intention of how can we continue to be practical, useful with the internet, or not the internet, the Enneagram, and just letting it, rather than just letting it be something fun, which I think, and I hope that it is fun, but I also want it to be useful. So stay tuned for that. Today we're going to be looking at a specific meeting dynamic, and I will give the disclaimer that we are stereotyping here. Okay. These are general descriptions, ways to think about these types, common tendencies that they each have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if you are one of these, this is how everyone thinks that you show up, or I think you show up, or that we should assume that our teammate is going to do or to show up in a certain way if their type is one of these. So I'll share that disclaimer, but we can look at it through the lens of these two types, but we can also just kind of think in general, like there's kind of some, like an energy, regardless of what type you are, that you might bring if you're relating to more of the type 7 teammate that we're going to talk about, or there's some energy, some things you might do if you're more in line with this type 5 energy, again, regardless of what type you are. So I think no matter what type you are, you're probably going to see yourself in one or the other. You might see yourself a little bit in both, and each type, again, can take on different qualities, behaviors of each other at times, depending on what's going on, stress, if they're have done a lot of growth, just the day. So I want to be careful about saying this is how all sevens are going to show up in a meeting, and this is how all fives are going to show up in a meeting. And if you've been listening for a while, I think you know that we're always cautious about that. But just as a reminder and a disclaimer, if this happens to be one of the first ones you're listening to. So let's take a look at this type 5, type 7 meeting dynamic. So you may have been in a meeting, maybe either as somebody who is watching this take place or potentially as being on the receiving end of one of these, or maybe you notice yourself in one of these and how you might feel. And we're specifically going to look at a brainstorming meeting and how each of these types might show up, might be thinking about the situation, might be thinking about each other. So you're in this brainstorming meeting. You might have one person who is rapid firing ideas left and right. It's kind of like popcorn. It's exciting. It's energizing. There's energy going. But then on the other end, though, you might have somebody who is quietly sitting back, observing, maybe taking notes, maybe just sitting there, and you think, gosh, this person is aloof. They're not engaged at all. Are they even with us? Are they listening? Are they paying attention? And again, we're talking about the 5 and the 7, but I think there are a couple different types that you could swap in here, and it would be very similar. So we're going to look at this dynamic between a 7 and a 5, where you have the 7 who, brainstorming is their love language. We have type 7 mugs, and on the back it says just that. Brainstorming is my love language. And 7s loved a good whiteboard situation most of the time, just putting all the ideas of what's possible. What if we did this? Ooh, or what if we did that? Or what would happen if this? Or let's change this. And for a 7, what I hear from other 7s is that many times they know that they're not going to be able to do all the new ideas, or they might have a really exciting new idea initially, but it's like, I'm going to think about it a little bit. I'm going to sit on it. And eventually I'm going to realize, it's probably not doable, or the way that I was originally thinking it, probably not the best for everybody. So I'm going to get there, but it means so much if you can just let the 7 kind of air out those ideas, and it really even takes it to the next level if you can kind of go back and forth with them, and what if, what if this, and I have a friend who we will Voxer a lot, and sometimes we'll have these Voxer sessions, and we'll just say, hey, I'm just putting stuff on the table. Pick back up what makes sense to pick back up. I'm just going to share some random, kind of fun at the moment ideas. But once you consider them, once you think about them, once time goes by, you may or may not want to pick all of them back up, but maybe there's a piece of something you pick up. So let's just put it all out there on the table, and then we can figure out later what we want to pick back up. We don't have to, as we're putting it out there in real time, decide if it stays on the table or not. So that's how our 7s approach brainstorming, where our 5s might be a little more withdrawn. They might process what's being said, what's being asked, the ideas that are being written on the whiteboard. They might be processing them. They are processing them a little bit more slowly, though, in their minds, more thoughtfully, maybe more carefully. As a reminder, our 7s are striving to feel excited. So it makes sense that this would be some common tendencies of our type 7 teammates in a brainstorming session. They are looking for that excitement, that what's possible, what's next, the optimism. And then our our fives are striving to feel detached, self-sufficient, competent, capable. So it makes sense that they would maybe pull back just a little bit, observe before speaking. Like this dynamic based on that core motive or that strategy that they tend to use most often, it makes sense why they each show up this way. Now, if you're a 7 in this meeting, you might be thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I am fueling the fire. I am fueling the creativity fire over here with these ideas. I'm really getting the energy going. I'm sharing interesting ideas. And if you're a 5, you might be wondering, when is everybody going to stop talking long enough for you to share an actual good idea? And that might be a couple of thoughts that these two types might have. So it makes sense then, based on this, that there might be some friction. There might be some miscommunication. There might be some challenges when it comes to collaborating because of these very different approaches, because of the perspective that each of them have, the lens that they're looking at this same situation through, but seeing it from a very different lens. So our type 7 might think brainstorming is all about the energy. Let's just bounce ideas off each other in real time and just see what happens. See where the magic unfolds. You never know, because sometimes somebody says something and then somebody else says something, and before you know it, we've put these ideas together, or we've come up with something completely new, but we would have never got there had we not had all the bouncing of ideas. And a 5 could really struggle in a brainstorming session if that's how it's ran. They're going to want to see maybe a little bit more structure and logic and maybe some efficiency to this brainstorming session. So they might be thinking, you know what, maybe it would be a good idea if we all brainstormed on our own before coming to the brainstorming meeting and write down the ideas that we have and then only share the ones that make sense. So, maybe it makes more sense as a type 5. They might think, let's explore these ideas fully before we just start throwing things on the wall. Before we jump into the next idea, could we sit here and think about and explore this idea that brought up? It's a good idea. Can we explore it before we move on to the other 12 ideas? So again, you can start to see, okay, this is where some clash and friction is going to happen, especially around interrupting. And this is something that I think 7s would do out of excitement. Maybe 8s might also do, but it could be out of excitement, but it could be more coming from a place of kind of wanting to control the conversation, the direction where it's going. So you might jump in and interrupt, or what others interpret as an interruption. But you might see it, especially as a 7, as collaboration, as engagement. And so you might interrupt somebody else because you're flowing, you're vibing, you got that energy. Somebody might interrupt you, but you don't see it as that. You see it as they are in it, they are excited to be here with you, and it's just like, oh yes, we're adding fuel to this fire. But a 5, sometimes our 9s might feel this way as well, might see interruptions as disruptive or as dismissive. You don't care about what I have to say. You're not even going to let me finish what I'm saying. And I'm still thinking. And this can happen sometimes. I think most of the time it happens on accident. I don't know that anybody's purposely trying to cut somebody off, just to be mean, to cause problems. But I also think that, I also think sometimes you may not even realize that the person is still talking. Sometimes 5s, 9s, maybe 4s. We all can sometimes be a little slower to to share ideas, to get words out. Feels like I'm doing right now. And so there are others, though, that just tend to, like, thought pops in, words go out. And there are others that thought pops in, and then I'm going to have another thought that is analyzing that thought. And then I might analyze it a little bit more before I actually say. And so I want to make sure that my words land how I intended them to. I want to make sure that what I'm saying makes sense and that it is, it sounds smart. I don't make a mistake, or I'm not just saying random things. I want to make sure before I talk. So sometimes fives and other, like I mentioned, nines, I can see this happening often too, is they will kind of pause. And somebody might think that they are done talking, but they're just processing and going to say something else. And that can be really difficult for those of us who are a little more uncomfortable in silence, or who get so excited and do want to just kind of jump in when there is a moment for us to do so. We think, oh, they're done talking, or they've taken a breath. This is a great chance for me to jump in, but they're not done yet. They're just a little bit slower to get it out because they really want to be intentional with what they're saying. Our type sevens tend to really appreciate kind of that open-ended exploration of ideas, where our type 5 is really craving in these situations depth and clarity. Okay, like throwing 25 ideas on the whiteboard isn't exciting for a type 5, but also it's not exciting for a type 7 to have all these ideas inside their heads and not be able to at least put them out on the table, so to speak, like we were talking about. So sometimes some problems that might come up here is that our sevens might be experienced as dominating the conversation and overwhelming others, especially in the situation, the type 5, with too many scattered ideas. It's like, I don't know what to focus on. There's so many ideas. I don't know what to do with these. What do we focus on? What do we do? This might feel like a waste of time because we're not really getting into anything to even know if it's feasible. So what are we even doing? And that can feel frustrating. Our type 5, when this happens, might really pull back, withdraw, retreat, feeling like the discussion is it's too chaotic to contribute in a meaningful way. And so we lose out on the type 5's really thoughtful, creative problem-solving ideas. So it's just important. This is a dynamic that is really important to be aware of. And when this happens, important insights from our type 5 can get lost. We need those that, like I just said, one of their key strengths is their ability to really be creative with the data, with the analysis, with the observations that they have been taking in. And then as they thoughtfully put it back out and make sense of it, it can really be insightful, powerful, really helpful and useful. So we don't want to lose out on that because they've withdrawn, because they feel overwhelmed. Our sevens, on the other hand, that excitement may lead to rushed, maybe half-baked plans, half-baked ideas, and it can feel a little scattered to the rest of the team, definitely to the 5. So how do we solve this dynamic? What do we do here? We want to make this meeting, this brainstorming session work for both types. So step 1 is we just have to recognize the dynamic. This is always step 1 in these situations, where we just have to bring some awareness, some recognition to what is going on. So notice, as a type 7, if this happens to be you, or if you happen to be working or leading a 7, notice when they're rapid firing ideas without leaving a lot of room for other people's responses. Type 7s, if you notice you're the only one that's talking and sharing these exciting new ideas, maybe just take a pause, kind of check in. I identify as a type 7, and I can feel myself in workshops and sometimes in conversations, doing this, just getting really rushed with my speaking, getting really excited. And I sometimes almost feel I almost feels like going off track a little bit because I'm almost like my thoughts can't keep up with how fast I want to get these things out. And so sometimes I don't know that it makes a lot of sense. And so I really have to be intentional, and you may even hear it on the podcast if you've been listening, or in a workshop. I will have to really be intentional about slowing down the pace and sometimes even turning down the volume and just slowing it down as I'm describing something, just taking a little more time, get the words out, let my thoughts fully form before saying them. And sometimes that can actually help people pay even more attention to what you're trying to say. So some sevens might really have that dialed in. You know that about yourself. You've done that already, and you notice when you do it, or maybe you don't even notice you've done it. You've just had to adapt. You've learned to adapt, and that is awesome. Others, this might be something for you to practice, to practice. Notice when you're doing this, recognize, and then practice slowing it down. For our type 5s in these situations, you've really got to fight the urge to retreat completely, to just totally check out. If the conversation is moving too fast, you might just say, hey, let's just pause for just a second. I'd like to add something. I mean, that is very attention grabbing. Slow it down, speak up, resist the urge to totally check out. Hey, let's just pause here for just a second. I'd like to add something. So that might be something you practice by yourself so that when the time calls for it, you're ready to say that. Step 2 is we've kind of gotten into this a little bit already. Just slow down that brainstorming flow. And for our 7s, instead of blurting out 10 ideas, try sharing one and just letting it breathe a little bit before jumping to the next. Or you could have like a flash brainstorm dump where, hey, everybody, let's just get things up on the whiteboard for the next 5 minutes. So just share everything you got. And then the rest of the brainstorming time, we can go through it and with more depth and thoughtfulness. So that's another way to potentially approach that, because 7s are going to want to get those ideas out. But it will be the work of the 7 to pull back a little bit, to slow that down and let those ideas breathe. Our 5s, if you need time to process, don't wait until the conversation is over. Just use a quick verbal cue. Hey, I have a thought on that, to signal when you're ready to jump in or when you'd like to jump in. People want to hear from you. Make sure, again, just be cautious of feeling like, hey, it's pointless to even say anything. Nobody's listening. This is chaotic. You could really have a very impactful, very influential, very commanding, really, presence by just saying some of these things, slowing it down, speaking intentionally. I have a thought. Hey, I have a thought I'd like to add on that. All right, step 3, you want to structure the meeting to help both types. Again, here I am. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So one thing you could do was kind of that quick, everybody share their ideas, everybody go around the room. We're going to go counterclockwise. If you have an idea, when it's your turn, shout it out. We'll put it on the board, or we'll put it on the paper. We'll put it on the table, so to speak. And if you don't have an idea, we'll skip you and we'll just keep going around and around until everybody is out of ideas or our time limit's up, is one way. That way everybody has an opportunity to speak. Another way to do this is you could have some sort of rule where no one gets to talk twice before everybody has talked at least once. And I really like that one. I think that one can be beneficial for our type 5s. I think it could also, again, be beneficial for our type 9s. Another idea is everyone write down the ideas before the discussion starts. So this is one of the things we talked about that the 5 might wish people would do. And so this might be a type 5 suggestion. And this can really be helpful. I think it's... I don't know if it's Jeff Bezos or where I heard the story, but he requires everybody to, however the meeting is going to go, you got to type it up. You got to put it on the paper. If you want to propose something, you got to write it out rather than just verbalizing it, because it really forces you to be thoughtful and meticulous and understand, how things are going to impact each other, so that when you are presenting it to the group, it makes sense. It is ready to do something with, if it makes sense to move forward on. And so writing down can be really helpful, especially for our 7s who might have so many ideas. And you might see right away as you write them down, you're like, oh yeah, that's probably not going to work. Just scratch it out. But you were able to get it out. And so this idea specifically with the writing helps 5s organize their thoughts. And it helps our 7s kind of focus that energy. And then we talked about the timed system, where each person gets 30 seconds, 60 seconds to present an idea before moving on. And this can be really helpful for our 7s to keep it tight, to keep them from dominating the brainstorming session, while also encouraging the type 5 to participate. And so, whatever that time frame is, setting some sort of time. All right. And then step 4 is appreciating each other's strengths, because both of these types are bringing a lot of good things to this brainstorming meeting dynamic. Our type 5s insights add depth and practicality to the type 7's big ideas. So for 7s, the things we really want to appreciate about those 5s is that depth, is that practicality, is the logic, the rationale, the data that they're using to back up, to hopefully be able to bring all your big ideas, or at least some of your big ideas, to life. So you can lean on them for the how behind your what if, what's possible ideas. And then our type 5, the thing that you can keep in mind that to appreciate in your type 7 teammate is that 7s really can spark a lot of energy. They can be incredibly magnetic. They can also be incredibly innovative. And so be willing to allow some flexibility in the brainstorming process. You want to have a process so that it gets done. Things are appropriately vetted for efficiency, for practicality, but just allow there to be maybe some room, some space for going off the rails a little bit in a brainstorming session. And it doesn't have to be an hour. It's just like, oh, okay, let's just let them talk, off the rails maybe for 30 seconds kind of thing. And so those steps again were just recognizing the dynamic, step 1. Step 2, to help improve this workplace dynamic collaboration, is to slow down the brainstorming flow. We talked about a couple ways to do that. Step 3 is to structure the meeting to help both types. We talked about 3 ways to do that. And then step 4, making sure you're appreciating each other's strengths. And that can really help. As someone might be frustrating to you, it can take that frustration down just a notch if you can also remember, what, this is frustrating, but that same energy is also fueling these things that I really appreciate about this person, or I really appreciate what they're bringing to this meeting. So with that, as we wrap up, we want to thank type 7s one of their superpowers is expanding what's possible. And our type fives are really great at refining and focusing on those things that might be possible. So the best brainstorming sessions really happen when both of these types, when both of these energies are coming together. So in your next brainstorming meeting, you could try this. Start with 2 minutes of silent writing, maybe before speaking, or you could assign everybody to come to the meeting with their ideas, having set aside 2 minutes on their own time or however long before anybody speaks. And then that can really help the type 5, like we said, organize their thoughts and give this type 7 a chance to focus their excitement. So brainstorming isn't just about who talks the most. It's about making space for the best ideas. So whether you are the idea machine or you're the deep thinker, we need everybody to be heard. And we need everybody to participate in a way that allows others to also participate and brainstorm in this specific situation. So with that, I hope that there is something that you can take away and either use yourself as you go into a future brainstorming meeting, or if you happen to lead one of these types, that you can have some specific ideas for things to work with them on. And these are the sort of workplace dynamics that we talk about inside our Enneagram Dream Team workshops, inside our Enneagram Dream Team certification workplace program. And if this is something you are interested in bringing to your own team, I'm going to invite you to start over on our website at enneagramMBA.com to see what options are out there, what track might be best for you. And with that, thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.